Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear viewers. This is the second module of the course Fast and Fasting. In this module, we will cover two topics: Sharia of the fast and some ahadith which relate to the fast. First, we will discuss the Sharia of the fast. Now, it would have become evident from the first module in which we had discussed the history of the fast that fasting was something which was already known before the advent of Prophet Muhammad. It was the sunnah of the prophets prior to the Prophet Muhammad. All that the Prophet did was that he laid sanction to this once again. So people were well introduced to this worship ritual. They knew its bounds and limits, and they were not unknown to them. The words in which this directive is given, it shows that, of course, it was made mandatory upon them, just as it was made mandatory upon the earlier prophets of God. So therefore, it's an age-old sunnah, and as far as the Sharia or the law of the fast is concerned, we completely derive it from the sunnah of the prophets of God before Prophet Muhammad. And to be precise, these are they can be stated in institutes. So number one, the fact that the fast is an abstention from drinking and eating and from sexual intercourse with one's wife is something which is an age-old sunnah of the Prophet. So this is the Sharia it belongs to the Sharia of the fast. Then also known to this sunnah is that fasting during the menstrual and pubertal cycles for women is prohibited. Obviously, they would be made to make up for these missed fasts, but during if these cycles fall within the month of Ramadan, they are exempted. They are prohibited to fast. In fact, not exempted, prohibited, and they'll have to make up for these fasts later on. The third thing also, which is evident from the sunnah regarding the fast, is that the ritual of itikaf, which is the pinnacle of the fast, is not incumbent like the fast of Ramadan. It is an optional and a voluntary act of worship. When a person stations himself in a mosque, devoting entirely to the Almighty, this is what we know from what itikaf is. And during this itikaf, he cannot leave the mosque unless for some compelling human need. So we can see that clearly the fast and itikaf have been given to us through the sunnah. Now, as far as the Quran is concerned, what it has done is it has only restated the fact that it is an obligation. It has also outlined certain concessions which were initially given and later withdrawn, and then answered a question regarding the itikaf and one's relations with one's wife when one is stationed in itikaf. So these are the three questions which the Quran has answered. So we will read the relevant portion of the Quran which describes these stipulations by the Quran. So the Quran is basically just clarifying certain things and answering certain things. As far as the Sharia of the fast is concerned, we already have it from the Sunnah. So these verses are actually verses 183 and 185 from Surah Baqarah. The words are, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu kutiba alaykum as-siyam kama kutiba alal ladhina min qablikum la'allakum tattaqun أياما معدودات فمن كان منكم مريضا أو على سفر فعدة من أيام أخر وعلى الذين يطيقونه فدية طعام مسكين فمن تطوع خيرا فهو خير له وأن تصوموا خير لكم إن كنتم تعلمون شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن هدى للناس وبينات من الهدى والفرقان فمن شهد منكم الشهر فليصمه ومن كان مريضا أو على سفر فعدة من أيام أخر يريد الله بكم اليسر ولا يريد بكم العسر ولتكملوا العدة ولتكبروا الله على ما هداكم ولعلكم تشكرون. Believers, fasting has been made mandatory upon you as it was made upon those before you, so that you become fearful of God. These are but a few days. But if anyone among you is ill or on a journey, let him fast a similar number of days later. And those who have the capacity to feed a needy should feed a needy in place of it. Then he who does a virtuous deed of his own accord, it is better for him. And if you fast, then this is even better for you if you but knew. It is the month of Ramadan in which the Quran was revealed as a book of guidance for mankind and in the form of manifest arguments, which are a means of total guidance and a means of distinguishing right from wrong. Therefore, whoever among you is present in this month, he should fast. and he who is ill or on a journey should fast a similar number of days later on. This concession is because God desires ease for you and not discomfort. So this was the initial directive in which the people were allowed, if they were sick or on a journey, they could, if later on they could fast, it was much better. But if they could just feed the needy in place of a fast miss, then that would be fine as well. But later on, this concession was withdrawn, and people who were not able to fast because of sickness or being on a journey, they were required to make up for this missed fast. And this concession, which was withdrawn right after it, we find that these words of the Quran which say, and the permission given to travelers and the sick to feed the needy has been withdrawn, because you can complete the fast and thus not be deprived of the blessings of fasting. And for this purpose, the month of Ramadan has been fixed, so that in the form of the Quran, the guidance God has bestowed upon you, you glorify God and express your gratitude to Him. So we can see that initially people who were not used to fasting in other months other than Ramadan, they were given this concession that if because of illness or being on a journey, they could not fast in the month of Ramadan, and if they had the capacity to feed a needy, they could feed a needy in place of not fasting. And if they could do something more, some more virtuous act, that was even better. And the Quran says if they could fast, then this is even better. But as I said earlier on, later this concession was withdrawn, and people who missed fasts because of their being ill or being on a journey, they had to make up these missed fasts later on. And the repetition of these Quranic words regarding the person being sick on a journey, right off the word Shahru Ramadan allazi unzila fihi al-Quran, tells us that this permission had been revoked, and now people have to keep fasts that they have missed. The second important clarification which the Quran has made actually is that it tells us that during itikaf, a person, of course, is permitted to eat and drink after he breaks his fast, but he cannot have sexual intercourse with his wife. So the Quranic words are, وَلَا تُبَاشِرُوهُنَّ وَأَنْتُمْ عَاكِفُونَ فِي الْمَسَاجِدِ تِلْكَ حُدُودُ اللَّهِ فَلَا تَقْرَبُوهَا كَذَلِكَ يُبَيِّنُ اللَّهُ آيَاتِهِ لِلنَّاسِ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَتَّقُونَ. And do not lie with them even at night. Them here refers to the wives. So do not lie with them even at night when you are stationed in itikaf in the mosques. These are the bounds set by God. Do not approach them. Thus He makes known His revelations to mankind that they may attain righteousness. So this is as far as we can see the Sharia which was given through the Sunnah and some of the clarifications and answers which the Quran has given. Now there are certain other things which the Prophet Muhammad has clarified and answered regarding this worship ritual. So I'm just going to also enlist them. And they are actually 7 in number. So the first of them is that fast should not be kept just 1 or 2 days before the Ramadan begins. The Prophet did not approve of this practice and remarked that the only exception to this is the person who fasts on that day. The second thing is in this regard is that one should eat the sahur, which is the pre-fast meal. And the Prophet has said that a person who eats it should know that it brings blessings, so it is a blessed meal. The third thing that has been clarified with the Prophet is that during the fast, a person can be intimate with the wife in whatever way he chooses, except for having sexual intercourse with her. Aisha radhiyallahu anha narrates that during the fast, the Prophet would kiss her and press her closely to him. The fourth thing is that the fast can be kept in the state of janaba, which is ceremonial uncleanliness. So Aisha radhiyallahu anha again says that the Prophet sometimes will begin the fast in this state and then do ghusl after the time of Fajr, as soon as the time of Fajr arrived. The fifth thing in this regard is if a person eats forgetfully, then this does not break the fast. The Prophet remarked, it is Allah who has fed him. The sixth thing is it is better if the itikaf is observed in the second or third portion of Ramadan and is observed for full 10 days, except if the month is of 29 days. It is evident that the Prophet too generally followed this practice. And the eighth and last clarification by the Prophet is that intentionally breaking the fast is a grave sin. If a person commits this sin, he should atone for it, and the atonement which the Prophet prescribed was the same as the one that the Quran has prescribed for zihar, which is feeding 60 poor people are fasting consecutively for 60 days. But in that particular scenario, when the person who came to the Prophet and he said that he had intentionally broken his fast, he said that he is not able to carry out these atonements. The Prophet did not insist, which tells us, of course, that one should impose a penalty as hard as one is able to tolerate. And the prescribed one, we know what the Prophet has told us, but other than that, any other penalty which a person thinks that he can tolerate should be self-imposed. So now we come to the second topic of this module, which are actually certain ahadiths which relate to fast and fasting. I'm just going to read out briefly their texts. So one of them says, when the last 10 days of Ramadan would arrive, the Prophet would fully prepare himself to worship the Almighty. He would worship the Almighty late in the night and would wake up his family members for this as well. And then it is narrated that when Ramadan comes, the doors of paradise are opened and the doors of hell are closed and devils are enchained. So another narrative says, a person who fasts in Ramadan with faith and while holding himself accountable to God, his previous sins are forgiven. Of course, these sins are here referred to minor sins which do not need any atonement, and of course which do not relate to usurping the rights of any other person. And then it is also said that a person who prays during the night in Ramadan with faith and while holding himself accountable to God, his previous sins are forgiven. The Prophet is reported to have said that one should try to seek the Laylatul Qadr in the last 10 days of Ramadan, particularly in the nights which begin with an odd number. While referring to this essence of fast, it has been said that the fast is for God and only He will reward a person. And therefore, this is something that we can really cherish, that if we are fasting, its reward is something which only God will give. Another narrative is that the smell of the mouth of a person who fasts is more pleasant to God than musk. And finally, we have this narrative which says that there is a door in paradise called Rayyan. People who fast will enter paradise from this door on the day of judgment. No other person will be able to pass through the door. It shall be asked, where are the people who fast? At this they will get up and no one else will enter with them. Once they will enter paradise, it shall be closed. No one else after them would be able to pass through it. So, dear viewers, this brings us to an end to the second module of the course, Fast and Fasting.